All right, well, hello everyone. As I mentioned, my name is Matt, and I'm a customer support engineer here at Userscape. We're going to go ahead and get started with our session today on the knowledge base and responses inside of HelpSpot. A couple of housekeeping items just to note as we get started here. First of all, I am recording this session, so if you have colleagues that wanted to join but weren't able to, that type of thing, I will have a recording posted up on the HelpSpot website after this session concludes. In addition, there is a questions panel inside of the GoToWebinar interface here. Feel free to ask questions at any time inside of that questions panel. I'll actually be checking that a few times here as I kind of go through what I have planned, since I am going to be jumping around to a couple of different topics in different areas. I'll try to pause a couple times and answer any questions that have come up, and then move on with what I have planned. And then any time that we have at the end will also be dedicated to questions as well. I'm using a test instance of HelpSpot here today, so I have a bit of knowledge base information and a few responses pre-populated into here. If you were just coming into a fresh HelpSpot installation, you would be starting from scratch, like in this example here in this screen, without any knowledge books added yet. But I've pre-populated a few things just to make it a little easier for us to look at some things quickly and get started with working with both the knowledge base and responses. All right, so with those items out of the way, let's go ahead and dive right into knowledge bases and responses in HelpSpot. So the first thing that I wanted to cover today is just what the knowledge base tools and responses tools are designed to allow you to do inside of HelpSpot. So much of HelpSpot's interface is dedicated to having one-on-one interactions with customers in order to solve their issues. However, you are using HelpSpot in order to do that. However, the knowledge base and responses tools are two areas in HelpSpot that allow you to store longer-term process information or documentation. And they're related, but they have separate purposes, and you would choose to use each one in different cases. So I just wanted to first kind of cover conceptually when you would think about using a knowledge base versus using a response. So knowledge base articles allow you to store articles in a structured book, chapter, page hierarchy. So you have books at the top level, and then chapters underneath that, and then pages inside of those chapters, just like you would in a traditional paper-based book. So knowledge base articles can be either public or private. So they can serve as self-service documentation for your customers, or they can serve as internal documentation just for your staff. And you can actually mix and match those, make some things public and make some things private. And we'll take a look at that in just a second. But just keep in mind that if you're wanting to make something public and searchable for your customers, knowledge bases instead of responses is where you're going to want to be looking. Also, knowledge base articles can be linked in HelpSpot requests, but they really remain independent web pages. So they're stored on the web, so you can link a customer to a knowledge base article, but that knowledge base article isn't going to be inserted into your response to the customer. Instead, it's going to be a link, and it will take that customer out to that web page. So that's a key difference with responses. So responses are going to actually insert text into a response that you're giving to a customer. So they will actually go into that email that you're sending to the customer. So they're embedded right in. And they also don't provide any kind of customer searching or self-service. So there's no public way for customers to browse through responses or anything like that. They do include a folder organization inside of them, but responses don't have that formal book, chapter, page type organization like a knowledge base article does. Also, responses can only be used in requests. So they aren't available in other areas in the HelpSpot interface, whereas knowledge bases we'll see have their own separate tab and that type of thing. Also, responses can affect other parts of the request since they interact directly with the request. So they can do things like changing the category, custom fields, setting the status of the request, different things like that. And we'll dive into more detail of how you set that all up. But just keep in mind that responses are designed to actually interact with the request that you're working on. Also, responses don't need to be complete thoughts or complete answers. They can also just be snippets of text. And we'll look at kind of how you might think about using that in just a little bit too. But that's another kind of difference between knowledge bases and responses. So with that overview out of the way, let's go ahead and dive into the knowledge base area, and we'll look at building out some different parts of the knowledge base interface, and then after that, we will move into responses. All right, so I'm already in the knowledge tab here of the knowledge base setup inside of HelpSpot. When you log in, you would just come to the workspace here, and to get over to the knowledge bases, you would just click on the knowledge tab here. So that's where I'm at. And the knowledge base module can have multiple books, as I mentioned. So over on this left-hand side here, I have one book here right now that's called documentation. And inside of that book, I have chapters and then pages. Now I can go ahead and add another book if I wanted to. So I'm going to go ahead and add another book here, and we'll just start kind of walking through some of the options that I have here when I start setting up a book. So when I go ahead and set up another book, the first thing that I have as an option is to give the book a name, obviously, but then I can set the book type to be either public or private. And this is what I mentioned earlier. Public books are going to be shown to the customer. And then private books are going to only be available for staff members. So let me just switch tabs here quick, and I'll show you what I mean by shown to the customer. So I'm going to switch over to this other tab, and this is my public HelpSpot portal. So this is the public area of HelpSpot that all customers can access. So you can see my documentation book that I have already set up in HelpSpot is available here. And as a customer, I can go ahead and start clicking into these chapters and the individual pages inside of this, this knowledge book. However, I'm going to go ahead now and we'll set up a private book, and we'll see how that doesn't show up for the customers but is only available for staff. So we'll call this the troubleshooting book. And so this is just going to have some internal troubleshooting documentation for my staff members. Now, the next thing that I can choose down here inside of the knowledge book setup is who I want to have be knowledge book editors. So all of my staff members are going to be able to view this knowledge book. However, only some of them will be able to actually edit this book. And that means adding pages, adding chapters, editing the pages, that type of thing. So if you have specific staff members that are responsible for different areas of your documentation or organization, you can add them as editors to specific books. So in this case, let's say maybe myself, Petra, and Rebecca are all the editors that should be adding or editing documents inside of this troubleshooting book. And then finally, I can add a short description if I want to. And this is really used mainly on the portal. So if you want to have a description included on the portal, you can put that in here. We'll just leave that blank for right now. All right, so my new private knowledge book has been added. We can see that it's marked in red here as opposed to the blue one up here that is public. So that tells us right away that this is a private knowledge book. And if we go back over to our portal here and just head back to the home page, we'll see that still only the documentation book is listed here, and I don't have, as a customer, any access to that private troubleshooting knowledge book. So that's only available for staff. All right, so let's go ahead and just continue to build out each level of the hierarchy inside of this troubleshooting book, just so we can see how each step looks. So next off, I'm going to go ahead and add a chapter to this book. So now you'll notice that chapters, again, can be hidden or shown. Now this is going to be a little bit different because this allows me to only show a particular chapter to editors. So this can be helpful, even if you're developing internal documentation. I can hide a particular chapter, and if I'm in the process of developing that chapter and I don't want staff members to begin using it. So maybe I have a new product and I'm writing up troubleshooting documentation, but I don't want the rest of my staff going into that troubleshooting documentation yet because it's incomplete. So I can go ahead and hide it and have only editors able to view it. And this would also, in a public knowledge book, this would also hide this specific chapter from customers as well. So we're just going to call this chapter login issues, let's say. And the other options that I have are, of course, the order of this chapter. So this is the first chapter that I'm adding to this book, so I don't really have many options here. But once I start to add multiple chapters, I'll be able to select where in the order of chapters I want this particular book to fall. And then finally, I can set up this chapter as an appendice. And so what that does is it's automatically going to appear at the end of the knowledge book, and it's not going to be numbered with the numbered hierarchy like all of the other chapters are. All right, so we'll go ahead and add our chapter, and now we're taken inside of this chapter right away, and then we can go ahead and add a page. And so the first thing we're going to be asked is, again, for the page title, and we'll just call this administrative password reset. And again, we can set the order. Since this is the first page we're creating, we don't have a lot of options here, but we would usually be able to select what order this page should appear in. We'll go ahead and add that page. And now on this page, we're able to select whether this individual page is hidden or shown. And so when you're setting this up, you have to have each level is going to affect anything below it, right? So if you have a chapter hidden, even if I were to show this page, it wouldn't be shown because the chapter that it's contained in is hidden. And the same thing goes for a book, obviously. If a book is private, I can't make a public chapter if the whole book is private, or I can't make a public page if the whole book is private. So the permissions of viewing do follow that same hierarchy. All right, so we're going to choose to not make this hidden here. And now I can go ahead and start adding some individual page elements here. So before we dive into that, looks like we might have one question here. So I'm just going to go ahead and take a look at that quick. Okay, so the question is, if you have, say, 10 different clients or customers and you want to create a public knowledge book, can you make it accessible to only that one customer? So that is a bit of a nuanced question because it really is going to involve how you are authenticating that customer is who they say they are. So when you're dealing with logins, you're usually dealing with, by default, you're just dealing with showing them their requests or not showing them their requests. So when you log into the portal, that's the only thing that it usually affects. It's not going to affect knowledge book visibility by default. Now that is something that the knowledge book templates, which we'll look at in a little bit, are very flexible. So you could hook into some of the authentication information that we store and show specific things based on the user being authenticated or not. But that would be involve some programming on your end. The other option that we'll look at in just a little bit is that if you are utilizing secondary portals, so you have a separate portal URL for each of your customers, you can choose which knowledge books you want to have shown on that specific secondary portal. So say if you have, company A dot yourcompany.com, and that's the portal for that specific customer, you can choose what knowledge books you want to have shown there. So that's another way. Again, you would have to control, who's accessing that URL somehow, or if you're just comfortable with it, just being a kind of security by obscurity, where just that customer can knows what their URL and that's the URL they go to. If it's not highly sensitive information, that might work as well. So I'll dive into that in a little bit when we look at secondary portals and how they work with knowledge books. So you can kind of see, but that's probably the most out of the box way would be with a secondary portal. All right, great question. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into kind of building out a page here, and we'll look at some of the different options we have and things that we can do inside of a page. So in the, we've already covered kind of the hidden, not hidden, and the page title, and then we have the page HTML here. And so this is going to be the actual body of the page that the that people are going to see. So we can edit this just like you would a request inside of HelpSpot. You have all the same kind of editing tools. We can add list items, we can bold things, all of those kinds of things we can do here right inside of the HTML editor. So let's go ahead and we'll just build out a little bit of content here just as an example. So give it a heading, and then we'll list out some steps here. Okay, so that'll be good enough for now. So there we go. We have some content here that we can work with. Now down below we have some more options here that we can set up for this page. And the first thing we have is we have knowledge tags. Now what knowledge tags allow you to do is to organize similar content even if it's located in different parts of a knowledge book. So in knowledge books we include the book chapter page hierarchy, but you might have content in different parts of that hierarchy that you want to still have linked together somehow because they're related. So knowledge tags allow you to build those other types of relationships. So an example might be maybe you have an article about logging into a system in the Getting Started chapter of your knowledge book, and you might want that to be related to another article about user permissions that's in the administrative area, and then you might want that to be related to yet another article that's in the troubleshooting chapter, like this one about changing your password, because they're all related to passwords and logging in. So what you could do in a case like that, even though all three of those articles are located in different locations in your knowledge book, we can tie them all together with a knowledge tag. And that's going to do a number of things in the user interface, both on the administrative side here and over on the customer side, that will allow your staff and customers to find these different pieces of related information more easily. So I can go ahead and start to add some related knowledge tags here. So as I start to type in some knowledge tags, I'm going to get hints as to knowledge tags that already exist inside of my system. So I've already created a passwords knowledge tag on some other articles. So I'm getting this hint here that is going to allow me to add that tag right into my administrative password reset page. And then maybe I have another tag that I want to have that is just an administration tag, right? So I'm going to tag all the articles that are related to administration, and then maybe let's add one more for users. All right, so I have all of my tags there. And now as I build out subsequent tags, I'll be able to start to use those administration and user tags that I've newly created in those other pages that I develop. So there's no real other interface for adding knowledge tags. You just do it all right through this interface. If it already exists, it'll be linked in. If it doesn't exist, we're just creating a new one here on the fly. So it's really quick and easy to do to add some organization around your knowledge pages. Now, the next thing that we can select here is what chapter this page occurs in. And this might seem odd because we were in a specific chapter when we added this page, but remember, you can come back in and edit these pages. So you might have a case where you're doing some reorganization and you want to move a page from one chapter or book into a different one. And you can do that right through this interface here. So you can see I have each book and then chapter listed. And so I can choose, oh, I actually want this to go up into my documentation administration instead of troubleshooting login issues, let's say. Say I wanted to move it there. I could go ahead and move it like that. And then I can select the order here again, just like I could at the other levels. And then finally, I can choose whether I want to have this page highlighted. And so highlighting is a flag that we can set on kind of the most important articles inside of a chapter. So if you have, a couple of articles that are the things that people are always looking for inside of a chapter, it can often be helpful to highlight those specific pages, and it'll just make them more prominent inside of the user interface in the portal. Next down here, I can attach files. So if you have, secondary documentation, maybe a PDF or a example code file, different things like that, you can attach those as downloads to this this particular page, and that can be great kind of for those extra helper files. Also, maybe if you have, a more detailed manual that's attached, you could add that file in here as well. And then finally, we can select related pages. Now, related pages are somewhat similar to the knowledge tagging that we did up above, but instead of being kind of this two-way relationship where once you tag something, it's related to everything else that is tagged, it's instead going to be a direct one-way link to that other page. So it's a more direct relationship, and it's just going to link me to another page here. So the way that this works is I can select what page I want this to be related to. So I'm going to relate this to the managing staff accounts page here. And then we can go ahead and see what that looks like. All right, so I have my page built out at this point. So I can go ahead and save these changes. And now I'm brought back to kind of the regular view of just viewing a knowledge page inside of the administrative interface. So you can see here, I can see when it was created on, who it was created by, when it was last updated, who did the last update. I have all of my knowledge tags here and my related pages. And I can follow this link here over to my related page. I can also follow my tags, and that will bring up a tag search that will show me related articles here as well. All right, so that kind of covers some basics of building out books, chapters, and pages. I know I kind of covered a bunch of information there, so I'm just going to pause here for one moment and wait and see if anyone kind of has questions on this area. Before we start, we're going to dive into some of the other things we can do as far as permissions are concerned, and we're going to start editing how knowledge books show up inside of the portal. and looking at some more at kind of how customers interact with the knowledge base. All right, it looks like everyone is good, so we'll go ahead and keep rolling for right now. So let's go ahead and I want to show a few permissions options that we have over in the admin area that can affect how your staff interact with the knowledge area. So we've already talked kind of about adding editors to specific knowledge books, making them public or private, in order to control whether just staff or staff and customers can see them. But we have a couple other controls over in the admin area. So if I go into my admin area and then into the organize area, I can set up my permission groups. So let's go ahead and edit one of these permission groups and we'll see what we can do in concern to knowledge books. So I have my help desk staff permission group here that I would probably set all of my help desk staff to be in. And one thing that I can control is whether help desk staff are allowed to manage knowledge books. And so this is going to be an overarching control of whether they're allowed to create, edit, and delete knowledge books. So if they aren't allowed to create, edit, and delete knowledge books, they aren't going to have the options like add book here when they go into the knowledge tab. So that can be helpful if you want your help desk staff to be mainly consumers of the knowledge books and not necessarily editing or adding things. Can be helpful, especially if you're a bigger organization, you have a dedicated team that's working on documentation tasks. We can also choose whether we want to allow this, this particular permission group to be able to view private knowledge bases. So we can set up some staff permission groups to be kind of more like a customer view. They're still going to get a few extra things, but it's going to be more of a customer view of the knowledge base. So if your private knowledge bases are mainly being used, for developing new documentation that you don't want your staff looking at, or maybe if it should really, the private knowledge base should only be available to kind of your level 2 teams or that type of thing, you can choose to turn off private knowledge bases for a specific permission group. So those are a couple of ways that you can kind of manage the permissions of the knowledge bases a little bit more for your staff members. All right, so while we're in the admin area here, we're going to go ahead and start to customize how our knowledge base looks for customers. So I have a default theme here loaded up for my customers, and you can see that all of my knowledge books are listed over here on the side. And we're going to see a couple things here that are listed. On the home page, I get my knowledge tags, and so that that's helpful to allow me to see and just kind of navigate to popular topics. If I click on one of these as a customer, I'm going to be shown where those knowledge tags match. And then in addition to that, I also have my most helpful pages listed here. And so where that is coming from is when customers are browsing through your knowledge base and they click on an individual page, when they're done reading the article, they can choose to rate, oh, I already rated that article. Let me rate a different article here. Here we go. So they can rate whether this article was helpful or not helpful. And we'll go ahead and take a look at this in a little bit. But this will then show up in reports for us and in the knowledge base. And so we can identify if certain articles aren't working for our customers. and fix them, etc. See if there's something in there that's out of date, incorrect, that type of thing. Or we can also see what articles are doing really well and helping a lot of customers, and then maybe develop more content around those specific items. Now, you'll notice here that I'm also able to browse around, and I have kind of a separate view for chapters, separate view for books, and then a separate view for the pages themselves. And I can actually customize all of these different views through the portal templates. So if you attended a past session about customizing portals, you'll know that we dove into a couple of these portal templates. And in this case, we're going to look specifically at these KB templates. So you can see here we have a template for the table of contents for a page. We have a template for the chapter. We have a template for the page itself. We have a printer-friendly template. And then we have a template for all available knowledge books. And then there are a few other ones related as well. Knowledge books are searchable, so the search template will actually be affected as well, and the tag search template as well. So those are all different templates that you can edit to change the way that your knowledge book appears. So in this case, I'm just going to show a simple example. When looking at knowledge pages, it is sometimes helpful to know when the knowledge base page was last updated. So I'm going to edit my page template and add in some new code that will show the customers when the page was last edited, just like we get in the admin area. So I'm going to go ahead and edit my kb.page.tpl.php template. And you'll see here that all of the PHP that builds this page is listed here. So here's where we're building out the navigational breadcrumb. Here's where we build out the page title. And then we include the header and the navigation elements. And then down here, we start to build out the different books and chapter that this specific page is in. And so in this case, right after the page name, I'm thinking it would be nice right here underneath this page name to have the date that this particular page was last updated. So I can go ahead and start to add that element in here. So I'm going to go ahead and make that a heading 3 item. And I happen to know already that the item inside of this page object that I need is the DT updated on. If you were kind of just getting started with this and wanted to take a look at what variables are available inside of any of these objects that we're using, you could go ahead and do a PHP var dump and get all of the output onto a page and just take a look at what the object looks like. But I've already done that, and so I'm going to go ahead and add in some code here that will just print out last updated, and then I'm going to echo out, I'm going to format my date, and then echo out that date time updated on. And we'll just close out our H3 tag here, and we'll go ahead and save that template. All right, so now that my template's saved, we should be able to go over here and refresh the page. And now you see that I have a new line here that shows the customer when the request was last updated. And so you can see it's pretty quick to start to go into the template code and edit some different things that are going on. So like, for instance, if you don't want that rating item at the bottom, we could go ahead and find that in the code and remove the rating function, different things like that. Okay, so speaking of that rating area, let me go ahead and show you what that looks like in the reports area. And we'll look at a couple of the other reports that we have available as well. So if I move over to the reports area, you'll see that I have a portal folder here, and that's where all of my knowledge-based reports are going to be held. So the first report that I have here that I've just mentioned was the KB Helpfulness Report. And so this is going to show me for each of my pages how many times it was rated helpful or not helpful. And so I can order it then either by most helpful or by most not helpful. And that can just allow me to surface articles, that are either doing a really good job or not doing a good job. Now, related to that, I can also pull up a report on what searches are going on my knowledge base. So if I go over to the public knowledge books here, you'll see that I am able to search my knowledge books as well as a customer. So maybe I want to search for servers, and then I pull up a couple of results here on servers, and then I can click into those articles. So it works just like a search on any other kind of website. So what this allows me to see is searches that customers that have done that have yielded few results. And I can choose what time I want this report to be for. So in this case, I'm just reporting from the 30th over to the 12th. And I can see that when users search for a terminal, they aren't getting any results. And when they search for administration, they aren't getting any results either. And so if those were things that I know I should have a page showing up for, I can look at this report and then go back into those specific knowledge book pages and perhaps keyword those pages a bit better so that they do show up in the search results. Another related report is I have the aggregate searches. And so this is just going to show me how many times different terms have been searched for. And so this can be very helpful just to know, what customers are looking for most frequently on the knowledge base, and help me develop better documentation around those specific topics. All right, so before we move over into responses, kind of the last thing I wanted to cover about knowledge bases. I should cover quickly. I did mention I would cover showing knowledge bases in a secondary portal, kind of to answer that question we had earlier. So let me cover that before we kind of wrap up on knowledge bases. I apologize. So if I go back to the admin area here and into secondary portals, I don't have any secondary portals here set up, but we can look at kind of what the example would look just here, look like just setting up a new secondary portal. So if I scroll down in here, I have all my regular secondary portal options. And one of those options is I can choose which knowledge books I want to be available on this particular secondary portal. So each secondary portal is going to have its own URL, and I can choose to have separate knowledge books available on each portal. So this is often used if you're supporting multiple products inside of HelpSpot. You can set up a secondary portal for each product that has its own URL. Then when customers go to that portal URL and search through the documentation, they'll only get documentation on that specific product. It can make the search results a lot less confusing for customers because if maybe they search for, using our example we've been using today, password reset, and they get instructions on how to reset a password in 4 different products, that can be very confusing for them to find the proper one. Whereas if you have your knowledge bases split out into these secondary portals, you can just return results on the appropriate knowledge book. But that's where you would go ahead and do that, is right here. Okay, so just kind of to wrap up on knowledge books, I know we've kind of jumped around to a bunch of different places, but I just wanted to kind of wrap up by giving a few ideas on how you might want to actually use your knowledge base if you're setting it up from scratch and get it organized. So some different ways that different organizations choose to organize their knowledge bases. Some choose to divide it up kind of by user role or type. So maybe think of a university. They might have a student knowledge base, they might have a staff knowledge base, and then a faculty knowledge base. And they have books, they have a book for each of those, and then chapters and pages related to each built out. And then that can be very easy then to split out if you are using the secondary portal method to only show the student knowledge base on the student secondary portal, for example. Another way is if you're just supporting a single product, maybe you divide up the knowledge base books by an activity inside of a product. So you'd have one for administration, one for exporting data, one for everyday work, let's say. And so that would be another way to organize your knowledge bases. You might also want to organize it by the stage or experience of the user. So you could have a getting started manual, a intermediate manual, and an advanced manual, let's say. Or you might want to organize it, as I mentioned earlier, by product. So if you're supporting multiple products, maybe you have a book for each product. And just as a final reminder, remember that books, knowledge books can be used by your staff. And so the way that they can most easily access knowledge books when supporting their customers is by clicking on the knowledge tag, or sorry, knowledge button here inside of a response or inside of a request. And then they can select the knowledge book, browse through it, find the page they want to link to, and then click on link to page, and that inserts a link to that knowledge book right inside of their note that they're creating. So as you're building things out, you also want to think about making it easy, not only for your customers to find the right information, but also for your staff member to find the information they need to insert into a request. So that kind of wraps up what we have, what I have to cover for knowledge bases today. I'm going to pause here for just a second. In case there are any kind of knowledge base related questions, I can go ahead and answer those at this point, and then we're going to switch gears, and for the remainder of our time, we'll dive into responses and talk a little bit about them. All right, so as I mentioned earlier, responses are going to be used inside of individual requests. So this is actually a great place for us to get started, is inside of a request, because this is where your staff members actually interact with responses. Unlike knowledge bases, we can go over to the knowledge tab, we can search it independently, we can search it as a customer. Responses are really limited to right here inside of a request. So I have a responses button here right next to my knowledge base button. And you'll see that I am able to browse through available responses inside of my system and use them. I can also search for them right here. And responses are going to basically allow me to automate things inside of a HelpSpot request. So I can type in here password reset instructions. I can hit enter, and I'm going to get my reset instructions inserted into my request here for me automatically. I'm also going to get the status changed to waiting for reply, and the category changed to general support. So all those things are done for me automatically through a response. So let's go ahead and kind of dive into how I made that all work inside of a response. And we'll build out a couple more just kind of as an example. Okay, so to build a response, I can just head back to my workspace here and click on the responses button. And this is going to take me to the responses editor. You can see my response that I already have here is listed. And down below here, I can go ahead and start to build out new responses. So let's go ahead and we'll just edit my existing response that I just used and see how that works first, just to kind of give an example. So at the top here, I obviously have my response title, and that's going to be what I can search against inside of that response interface. So it's a good idea to title your responses logically to allow them to be easily searched. And then I have any note text that I want to be inserted next. Now, an important thing to remember with responses is that responses don't need to be a fully formatted, complete email that you want to send to a customer. It can also be just a small snippet of text, or it could actually not be any text at all and just be other request actions. So you can actually use responses kind of like a macro in order to just do other actions inside of a request. So in this case, I have some instructions here set up, and I have them formatted. You'll notice that I got a nice numbered list, things like that. And we use a formatting language called Markdown in order to write our formatting for responses. This allows us to easily build a text version of the email and an HTML version of the email all in one. So here are some basic kind of things that you would often want to do and how to format them inside of a response here. So for example, bolding is going to be 2 stars followed by your bold phrase and then closed out with another 2 stars. This is how you would build a link, et cetera, et cetera. And you can just click on this formatting options in order to get all of those. And then if you click on see complete syntax here at the bottom, you'll get a even more in-depth knowledge base article actually on how to format all of this, all of your text here. We also supply a preview button that allows you to see what the text is going to be formatted like, so you can make sure that you did things right. Okay, so as long as we're talking about response notes, this is a good time to cover placeholders. This is something that can come in really handy and be used rather creatively inside of a response. So placeholders allow us to insert information that we have in the request already into the new response that we're going to create here. So for instance, in this, it just starts out with to reset your password. If I wanted to make this a more complete message, I could say hi, and then insert a placeholder for the customer's first name, and then a comma, and then have that all formatted for me so that it greets the customer as the email goes out, and is a little bit nicer there. You can also use this to insert other custom data that you have. So I've seen responses used to kind of build out actually a form email that includes a bunch of information that's in custom fields. So if you have some custom fields or other information built out, you can insert all of those tags in here and build out an email to your customers that includes a bunch of different information for them. So go ahead and take a look through all of these placeholders, and you'll be able to see all the data that's available. So for example, you could say, the person assigned to work with you on this, oops, is, okay, like that. So we could say, the person assigned to you to work with you on this request is the assigned first name. So we can do all sorts of different things like that in order to customize the body of the response and include different data that we have. All right, so then moving on down, you'll notice that I have this response organized into a folder that is general support items, but you can go ahead and add other folders. If you want to create subfolders, it's a little bit different. What you do to create a subfolder is you actually insert slashes into the name. So if I wanted to make a, let's say, support, and then troubleshooting folder, like that. That is how I would format it. And then I would have a support troubleshooting folder, and it would show up as a folder when I'm browsing through my my responses. I can also set a response owner. Now, the response owner is going to be the individual that is responsible for the creation of this this response. And basically, we allow you to reassign this in order to allow the controlling of editing. So responses can be reassigned to a different person to allow them to edit it. And related to that, we also have sharing of responses. So this response is shared with everyone in the HelpSpot organization right now, but we can also choose to just have personal responses that are only available for yourself, the response owner. And we can also share a response with a specific permission group or with specific people. So this is another way that you can really help to kind of keep the interface clean, is by only sharing responses with those people that are actually going to need to use that response. In this case, this is a password reset response, so pretty much everyone needs it. But in a lot of cases, you might want to limit your responses down to specific people that are actually going to find it helpful. I can also add attachments, and these attachments are stored inside of HelpSpot. So if you have documents or things that you're commonly sending to customers, you can often add those as an attachment inside of a response instead. And the nice thing about that is when you have an updated version of that document, let's say, you can go ahead and edit it one time here inside of the response. And then whenever that response gets used, that new attachment will get used. So you don't have to send out a new PDF to everyone to start sending out to customers or that kind of thing. And then finally down here, we have the request actions. I mentioned that I did a couple of things in this response. And so what I did in here was I changed the status to waiting for reply, and I changed the category. We also have note options over here, so we can set the email subject. We can set what kind of note it is. We can add CCs. So we have a lot of different options here to kind of control other things that are going on inside of the request. All right, so we'll go ahead and save those edits. Just a couple of other things to note is that you might want to create a response that's just a super small snippet too. So let's just say website pricing is maybe a response. And for this one, maybe all that we want in here is just to have a URL. And that's really the only thing we want it to have. Now, when I go ahead and use that, if I'm talking with a customer here, I can say, type in some manual things here. And then just go up to my responses, hit enter, and then I have my link inserted here for me automatically. So when you're thinking about building out responses, think about just those really small items that you might want to just have almost as shortcuts, as well as those bigger full emails that you want to send out. Now finally, responses have one report that you can run against them, and it's just kind of a usage report. It's under the staff folder and then response usage. And so what this allows you to do is select a time range, and you can either select a specific staff member or report for all staff, and you can see how often different responses are getting used. So this report can be used in a couple of ways. One, you can see, are my staff needing to use this particular response over and over again, when really this is something customers should be able to do themselves. So I should put it into a Knowledgebase article so that customers will hopefully find it before submitting a request. And it can also help you identify what the most commonly used responses are in order to review them and make sure they're accurate and that staff aren't sending out wrong information about anything. So that's just kind of a quick overview of responses. I know I didn't go into a ton of detail on responses just because we're running a little bit short on time here. And I wanted to leave a few minutes here at the end just for any questions. So if you have any questions at this point, feel free to ask them in the questions panel of the GoToWebinar. If you do need to take off, thank you very much for attending today. I hope you found this session helpful. And as I mentioned, the recording of this session will be found up on the training page on the HelpSpot.com website. All right, so we have a question just from someone who came in a little bit late, asking if you can have a knowledge base that's for internal use only, or is it always somewhat public? Yes, you can have a knowledge base for internal use only. So the distinction is actually going to be right over here. We control permissions at the top level, at the book level is the top level you can control it at. So if I click on this documentation book here and edit this book, you'll see that this book is marked as public, which is going to make it accessible out here, so I can navigate through this this documentation book. However, this troubleshooting book down here, if I go and edit this book, this one is marked as private, and it does not show up in the public interface at all. It's only available to logged in staff members. So yep, you can control on the knowledge book level whether it is public or private. And then you can actually do the same thing at the chapter level and then also at the individual page level. So for example, maybe if I didn't want this administration area to be shown, I could go ahead and make this hidden. And now that that is hidden, if I look at my table of contents here as a customer, I no longer have that administration chapter. Great question. All right, well, thank you everyone for attending today. Hope you found this session helpful, and I will be getting that recording posted, so if any of you want to review anything that you might have missed today, it will be available. Let me just go ahead and show where that is quick in case you haven't seen it before. So if you go to helpspot.com, go to support, and then video training, and then click on advanced topics. You'll see this session is listed here right now, and that will be swapped out for a recording like these other sessions here down below. All right, thanks a lot and have a great day.